Hello everyone. This is a video showing you basic steps on how to build a PC. I built this PC with spare parts I had laying around, and throughout this video I will try to keep it simple and show you just the basic steps it takes to build a PC. Thank you for watching. So the first thing I like to do in my PC builds is build on the motherboard first. This is an AM4 platform, so this is going to use an AMD processor. And let's start with installing the processor, and it can only go one way. And if you look in the corner, it's hard to see, but there's a little triangle on that top left corner that will line up with a little triangle on your processor to make sure it goes that way. And what I'm talking about is this little corner right here. There's a little gold triangle, so when we lay it in there, it's going to go about like that. And yeah, so this is pretty simple. All you do is this little arm right here, you can lift that up. And one thing too about this type of AMD processors, these pins are pretty easy to bend, so just be careful. And if they get bent, it's no big deal. You can usually bend them back and it will still work. But so this will just sit in here. You'll feel it line up, and the pin, it'll pretty much just set in there. You feel the pins go in, and if you just put this back down, it'll lock it in, and that should be secure. Like, it's in there pretty good, won't come out. The next thing, just get out of the way so I have a little more room, is on this one I'm going to be installing for the hard drive an SSD M.2, and this one's going to go under here, under this heat sink. So I'll show you how to take that off. And all motherboards are going to be different. I mean, some of them won't have a heat sink, or the heat sink will be down in another slot, but this is the one I have, so this is what I'm working with. And this takes 3 Phillips screws. There's one here, and one here. Take off. Okay. And see, this one has this thermal pad. When it's a new motherboard, just make sure, because a lot of times there'll be a protective film on here, make sure to take this off. This one already has been because it's used, but make sure to take it off, because if you want your M.2 to be cooled down with that thermal pad, you'll need the plastic cover off. Otherwise it won't cool properly. And so how this goes is, if you can see, there's different styles of M.2s, like different lengths, and this kind of shows right here, these different types. The very standard one is this one, which it's usually already set up with a post on that. Oh, there's still a screw there. Let me take that off. These are very tiny, so very tiny screw. And so with this, I mean, again, there's going to be all different types of M.2s. So with the M.2, it only goes one way. See how there's no chips on this side? So you want the chips facing up to help cool. Plus, I mean, the thermal pad is going to make contact with those chips. So it only goes this way, because as you see, there's a little socket here where this end goes, and then the screw will hold this little notch end down. So you just kind of, it almost goes in at an angle. You slip it in like that, you'll feel it click in, and it's kind of lifted up. And all you do is make sure it stays in that pin, or the socket, and then you hold this down, and it fits perfectly right there. But let's get the screw started. Okay. Okay, like that, and it's held in place. So I can put this heat sink back on, and basically with the SSD, I'm going to be running the operating system on this. I mean, you can, depending on what size, you can have these run the operating system. You can have it in a different type of hard drive. This is what I'm choosing. This is what I have. But I mean, this one's small enough. I'm just running the operating system, and then I'll probably add either another one here or an different type of SSD, the 2.5, for like games and bigger storage. Or, I mean, if you get a bigger M.2 SSD, then you could just use that all for storage and operating system and whatnot. So I'm putting this back on. Okay, and we can start with the heat sink now. Well, actually, no, we'll do the thermal paste next on the processor. But so far, this is what we got. And so with thermal paste, we got here, we're just going to do an installation. So with AMD, with their chiplets or under the heatsink, you can do like a pretty decent line straight down. I like doing the X pattern, just a light X pattern, so when the heatsink gets pressed down on it, you make good thermal contact. With a lot of Intel processors, the chips like directly center under the heatsink or the heat spreader, so you just do like a good pea-sized dab in the center, and that's typically good. But like I said, this is an AMD processor, so I'm just going to do a nice little X pattern. Just a light, you don't want to go too crazy. You don't want to get a bunch of thermal paste squeezed out of there, but not pretty, but doesn't matter. Just needs to make good contact. And so I'm just using this stock fan that usually comes with the AMD processors. So this is the CPU cooler. When they do come new, they'll have the thermal paste already installed on here, so you don't even have to install thermal paste on the processor. You can just pop it in, put this on, and you're good to go. But this is used, so thermal paste is cleaned off, and we had to apply some there. So with the back plate, how these usually come with the new motherboards is you have this backing plate underneath the motherboard, which goes something like that, and I'll have these clips hooked up in here. Usually if you're using, this stock cooler, you'll have to take these off. Some coolers will use these clip type or clip style brackets, but most coolers don't, so these have already been taken off. So we have the plate in the back though, but it just lines up like that. And with this CPU cooler, you're just going to be lining these screws up with those posts right there. And these goes right there. So I'm just going to set this down to keep it. I'll get the posts going through the holes for this. There we go. So it's all lined up, ready to go, so I can just install this right onto here. And however you want to. With AMD brackets, it only goes pretty much, you can only either go like that way or this way, because it's like a rectangle shape, so you can't mount it any orientation, which usually Intel, you can pretty much, it's a square, so you can orient it however you want to. This one's just, you either have it where the AMD is on this side or that side. I want to put it on this side. And so we'll line this up and start to secure this down. So with this, I'm going to do it like a cross pattern. Just do a light snug at first, just do a cross pattern, bolt pattern. Same thing with like lugs on a car. I'm going to start in this corner, go diagonal to this corner, then across to this one, and then back up here, and then go back and secure it a little better. Okay, so all I did was I started with a snug pattern, start with this cross, and then I went back, and then I'm not, you don't need to crank these down till it stops. It's like you just do it till it's a nice firm resistance, and I stop there. It's like kind of finger tight on my screwdriver. I don't go anything too crazy. So with this, you have the fan header that plugs in the motherboard, and that only goes one place too. It's up at this header right here, which on motherboards will be labeled as a CPU fan. Some of them I've come across had more than one, or an AIO pump for the water cooling, but let's see if I can get it. It's hard to focus, but I don't know if you can see, it says CPU fan. There we go. See, it says CPU fan 1 on that header right there. So that's where it goes, and it only plugs in a certain way. If you look, there's a notch on there, and there's a notch on the header of that fan. Some of these will, for the fans, will be a 3-pin. This one happens to be a 4-pin, but either way, it still goes in. A 3-pin will go in the same way. You just line up that notch. You just won't use all the pins, but this uses a 4-pin, so we'll just put it in there. Okay. See, it fits in that notch right there. And with this, I like tucking stuff, or tucking my wires so I don't really see them. Get them out of the way. Just looks nicer and cleaner. So something like that, you know, you can see it, but it's not too noticeable. And pretty much for the motherboard build, all I've left is the RAM, the memory sticks, and these. So some motherboards will have 2 slots. This happen to have 4 slots, and what you want to do is with these 4 slots, you start with the furthest away from the processor. So we're going this way, or this slot right here, and these will only go one way too. If you see, the notch is slightly off centered. It's not directly in the RAM or in the center of the RAM. It's slightly offset. So with this, the smaller section is going to be on the bottom, towards the bottom, which is how I have it right now. Then the longer part of the board will be on that top part. So there's a little channels that you line these up with in the slot itself, and you can kind of feel it right there. It's so, and then all you do is you push on both ends. You'll feel it click on both ends like that. And then with the next stick of RAM, I want to run this most efficiently in dual channel. You actually skip the next slot. You go to so you almost go like every other slot, and then same thing if you had a 4-stick setup, like if you want to, run more RAM or whatnot. But so with this, I'm actually going to do not the very next slot, but the one after, because this, like I said, this will make it so it runs in dual channel. It'll be a little more efficient on the memory side. And again, just click like that, and this is pretty much it far as what I prepare on my motherboard. And now we're just gonna be ready to actually set it into the case and start hooking up all the other connections. So before I put the motherboard in the case, I kind of want to go over some of the connectors, and since I can easily show you at this point, I'm kind of just gonna go left to right. But some of the main connectors that typically you use, or you're going to use in your build, is this is an audio. This will be one of your connectors to your PC case. And motherboards are going to have their connectors in random spots. I mean, typically a lot of these little connectors are on the bottom side of the motherboard. Let's see. They also have your fans. It'll say like system fans or fan connect. It's a fan connector for your PC fans in the fans in your case. You have also your PCI slots, all these. So when we put the graphics card in, I'm going to put it in this slot right here. You typically want to put it in the top slot. I mean, you have all these extra slots for any kind of like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi cards, or another graphics card if you wanted to do that. You have USB connectors right here, which are commonly used in your PC case, USB 3.0, which most modern cases have that connector now for your faster USB ports. There's one right here, and there's also another one right here, so I'll decide which one I want to connect to when I put it in the case. This is the one that's the most pain to connect, is the front panel connectors. You also have your SATA connectors, all these right here. Those are for if you want to expand and put more hard drives in your system. One of these will be the connection side of it. There's also a power side on the power supply, but that's what these are for. You have your 24 pin. This is like your main power to your motherboard that you have to connect into, and also up here is the main power to your CPU. So we'll have to connect to that when the power supply is in, and that's pretty much all we're going to use. And there's like RGB connectors. There's usually more system fan connectors around here and miscellaneous ones, but those are the ones that we're going to be using. So in this case, I have the glass front panel already taken off. It's just thumb screws on each four corners. We'll also have to take the back panel off, which is just these two thumb screws. So it's pretty simple. Just unscrew them. And the last one. And all that does is it makes it so you just can slide it out and have access to the back side of the case, where we can now install the power supply. When you purchase a case, it should come with all the included hardware needed for your build. Same thing goes with your power supply. So the power supply is going to go in this shelf, or this opening right here. I'm going to put the fan downward on the case, or facing the bottom of the case. And power supply will be mounted with 4 holes, which is here, 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 and here. And these are the included hardware that came with it. So I'm going to install that. Okay, I have the power supply all mounted. So all these little fittings right here are the standoffs where you mount your motherboard. So now I'm going to route the wires from the case and the power supply to where I need them. Most cases will have cutouts that all up and down and around the motherboard to run your wires. And then to note, these two, this one right here is the SATA power, which usually used for extra drives and whatnot, but we won't be using it in this build. And then this one's a Molex connector, which again will power random accessories, which we won't need, so we'll just tuck those ones away. We will actually be using the Molex connector for the RGB controller on this case that's right here. It's powered through this Molex, so we'll actually have that plugged in. I have the wires routed where I want them. We'll start off with the 24 pin, which is this. This will plug into the motherboard right here. And it only goes one way. You have the little connector that will match on the socket itself. Next, we have a power cable to the CPU socket, and it's going to be this 4+4 cable. It's going to look very similar to the PCIe connector, which is going to be used for your graphics card, but just remember the PCIe and usually the CPU cables are labeled. See, this one says PCIe, plus another indicator that this is for the PS or PCIe is the 6+2 type of plug compared to the 4+4. And like I said, again, these will only go one way. They will only fit in one way because there's like a series of little square and rounded pegs in here. So we'll connect this one over here. This case includes a USB 3.0 connector, which is always going to be this blue one. And again, this one will only fit one way. There's a little notch that will be shown in the socket here. There's also even another connection for USB 3 right here, so you can choose either way or either one to go for. I'm gonna plug into this one right here. Now I'm connecting the cables on the bottom side of the motherboard. First, we'll start with the HD auto connector. It'll be labeled on the cable there, and that will go over into the socket. This can only go one way because if you look at the plug itself, it has a solid pin with all the rest are actually pinholes. So you just line that up with the pins on the motherboard. This one is the RGB cable, which this will just make it so you can control the RGB on the fans with the motherboard. And this is a 4-pin. They'll usually come in a 4-pin or a 3-pin. 3-pin would be the 5-volt. This is the 12-volt. And it only goes one way too. As you see, that it's always marked with an arrow, which that's like the power, the positive side. And that will be marked on the motherboard connector too. And so it will go to the power always goes to the left. And then this is a USB connector, which is labeled on the plug or pin too. And again, like the HD audio one, it will have like a solid connection or a pin where a solid hole where there should be a pin, and that will line up with USB connectors. There's 32 on the motherboard here, right here, so you just line up the pins on that one. For the front panel connectors, the pins right here, this is what I'm talking about. There's a diagram right here showing where the connection or the little pins go. And like I said, they're labeled on the pins themselves. So just follow the little diagram, which should be on the motherboard or usually around the pins themselves, but this one's a little bit offset. So do your best to follow that. With the front panel connectors, you can plug them in one by one. What I like to do is just squeeze all the plugs together like this and try to plug it all in one. Try. It's not the easiest, but that's what like that. Next is the graphics card, and this will go in the PCIe slots. There's multiple ones usually on a motherboard, but we'll just put on the very top one right here and just make sure this clip is open. And to plug this in, all it is kind of like a cartridge. You just put these pins into that slot, and you'll know when it's put in properly because you'll hear it click and feel it click in there. Like that. And then here is the power for it, which graphics cards are all going to use, or different graphics cards will use different power pins. As you can see on the graphics card here, the power connectors, there's a 6+8. So on these plugs, you're not going to use this little 2 right here. You just have the 6 plug and then use both or all 8 pins on this plug. Make sure to secure your graphics card. This will have 2 mounting holes on the GPU plate, And all this is going to do is just make sure to secure this and support it. Like that. This will be the time I manage and tie all my cables and, take all the slack out of them, make it look a lot more presentable than this. So I'll get to that. I managed up all my cables. I actually rerouted the power cable for the GPU to the hole over here. It makes it look a little cleaner instead of just dangling down. I didn't go too crazy. What I like to use is Velcro ties. You can also use like zip ties or any other little twist ties, but see, I didn't go anything too crazy. Just clean up a little bit so you're not going to even see this on the backside, but I like making it a little cleaner. And then the extra cables that I didn't use for the power supply, I usually stash them away in the disk drive space, or you can even stash them away in the little compartment in here. These were the basic steps of building a PC. This is our completed system right here. This should help you for most builds. The main difference between Intel and AMD CPUs are just how they're mounted, and usually their coolers are how they're mounted, but as you can see, everything else is pretty much plug and play and compatible. Now that we have our completed system, let's power this thing on. Right now we'll be going through its boot sequence. Not too bad, right? I hope this video helps you in building your PC, and thanks again for watching.